Let me show you something worth noticing. There's a kind of worry that shows up after you've made it. Not before, after. When the numbers finally look the way you always thought they should. When the spreadsheet says you're fine. When the salary clears 6 figures or the portfolio crosses 7. That's when it starts. You'd think it would feel like relief. It doesn't. It feels like waiting for something to break. I've watched this happen to people who spent years grinding their way up. They hit the milestone. They get the promotion. They move into the bigger place. And somewhere in the middle of all that forward motion, a new feeling settles in. Quiet, persistent, hard to name. It's not the fear of losing everything overnight. It's subtler than that. It's the fear that you won't be able to stay where you are, that the life you built is one mistake away from unraveling, that you're not actually supposed to be here. Nobody talks about this part, not at dinner parties, not in the office, not even with their spouse sometimes. Because admitting you're anxious when you're objectively doing well feels like complaining. It feels ungrateful. So people just carry it around silently, like a low hum in the back of their mind. Here's what makes it strange. The anxiety doesn't scale down as the money goes up. You'd expect that once someone crosses a certain threshold, once they've built enough cushion, the worry would fade. But it doesn't work that way. Someone making $80,000 worries about job security. Someone making $250,000 worries about job security. The dollar amounts change. The feeling doesn't. The person at $250,000 just has a more expensive lifestyle to protect now. Bigger mortgage, private school tuition, a certain image to maintain. So the stakes feel higher, even though the math says they're safer. That's the trap. You think you're climbing toward security, but what you're actually doing is building a more complex life that requires more income to sustain. And the more you build, the more you have to protect. So the anxiety doesn't disappear. It just finds new things to attach itself to. I knew someone who made a career change in his late 30s. Took a risk. It worked out. Within a few years, he was making more than he ever thought he would. He bought a house in a neighborhood he used to drive through and wonder about. He could afford things without checking his account first. By every external measure, he had arrived. But he told me once, late at night after a few drinks, that he felt more anxious than he ever had when he was broke. Because now he had something to lose, and he wasn't sure he could do it again. The risk that got him there felt like a one-time thing, like luck. And luck doesn't repeat. That's the quiet part. The fear isn't just about money. It's about whether you actually deserve to be where you are. Whether you're skilled enough, smart enough, resilient enough to stay there. Whether you got here because of who you are or because of circumstances you can't recreate. Psychologists call this imposter syndrome, but that label doesn't quite capture it. Imposter syndrome is about feeling like a fraud. This is different. This is about feeling like you got away with something and now you're just waiting for someone to notice. And here's the thing, that feeling doesn't go away when you prove yourself again. Because the goalposts move. You hit one milestone and immediately the next one becomes the benchmark. You think, okay, once I get there, then I'll feel secure. But you get there, and the feeling doesn't change. You just recalibrate what secure means. This is why people who seem like they have everything together are often the ones quietly unraveling. They've built a life that looks perfect from the outside, but on the inside, they're running a constant mental audit, checking for cracks, scanning for threats, trying to figure out what they missed. And the worst part is, they can't talk about it. Because if you're doing well and you admit you're anxious, people assume you're either ungrateful or out of touch. So you stay quiet. You perform confidence. You laugh at the right moments. You nod when people say, "You've really figured it out." And you go home and lie awake wondering how long you can keep this going. I think what happens is this. When you don't have much, your focus is survival. The problems are concrete. You need to make rent. You need to pay off debt. You need to get to the next paycheck. Those problems are stressful, but they're clear. You know what you're fighting for. But when survival is no longer the issue, the problems become abstract. You start worrying about things that haven't happened yet. Market corrections, layoffs, reputation damage, the possibility that your skills will become obsolete, the fear that your kids will grow up entitled and fragile because they didn't have to struggle the way you did. These aren't tangible threats, they're shadows. But they feel just as real, maybe more real, because you can't fight them. You can only prepare, and no amount of preparation ever feels like enough. There's a study that looked at happiness and income. It found that happiness does increase with money, but only up to a point. After that, more money doesn't make you significantly happier. But here's the part they don't emphasize enough. After that point, more money also doesn't make you less anxious. It just shifts what you're anxious about. When you're struggling, you're anxious about survival. When you're comfortable, you're anxious about maintaining that comfort. When you're wealthy, you're anxious about staying wealthy. The anxiety never actually leaves. It just changes shape. And the people at the top, the ones who seem untouchable, they're often the most anxious of all, because they have the furthest to fall. And they know, even if they don't say it, that most of what they have could be taken away, not by bad decisions necessarily, just by bad luck. A lawsuit, a market crash, a health crisis, a shift in the industry. So they work harder, they save more, they diversify, they build contingency plans. And still, the anxiety persists. Because the truth is, you can't ever fully protect yourself from the future. You can only pretend you can. I think that's why so many successful people seem tightly wound. They've built something fragile, and they know it. They've stacked their life in a way that depends on everything continuing to work. And the more pieces there are, the more places things can break. There's a phrase I heard once. The price of a high-performance life is high-performance anxiety. And that stuck with me because it names the thing nobody wants to admit. That the life you worked for, the one you thought would bring peace, often just brings a different kind of stress. So what do you do with that? I don't think there's a clean answer. I don't think you can just decide not to care. But I do think there's something useful in recognizing that the anxiety isn't a sign you're doing something wrong. It's just part of the deal. And maybe the real question isn't how to get rid of it. Maybe it's how to live with it without letting it run your life. How to build something that matters without tying your entire sense of self to keeping it intact. Because here's what I've noticed. The people who seem the most at peace aren't the ones who've eliminated risk. They're the ones who've accepted that risk is permanent, that no matter how much you build, you're still vulnerable. And instead of fighting that, they've learned to make decisions from that place. They don't spend their lives trying to make everything bulletproof. They spend their lives doing things that would still matter even if everything fell apart. And that shift, small as it sounds, changes everything. Thanks for watching. Subscribe and turn on notifications so you don't miss what's next.